So what I'm doing here is bringing the head across to the other side, and we've got this on this guide rod or drive rod support bracket just loosely on at the moment, and we're just bringing it right across so we get as accurate as alignment as we can get, and that's bringing it right up to the stops here. Alright, so I can't go any further there, and now what we can do is make sure that that's all lined up, and once that's lined up then we'll tighten up that one nice and firmly, and basically that's the whole head unit aligned, assembled and ready for connection. The next part of the project is to assemble the electronics board that's associated with the CNC machine. And as you can see here, it comes in a couple of different parts. You got the acrylic plate or back plate, and then you got the printed circuit board with its componentry already installed, and that's all mounted together using the supplied M3 machine screws, spacer and the nut. We've actually brought these in from the back side, and the actual nuts are located on the top of the printed circuit board. So what we're going to do now is mount the board to the CNC machine, but before we can do that we've got to apply the screws that are going to hold, or the machine screws that are going to hold it on. What we're doing here is we're actually putting a couple of washers on each one as a bit of a spacer, and then we're putting the nuts on, so they're going to hold it onto the machine. Okay, so we just started to connect up the electrical cables for the stepper motors, and also the drive motor for the front. And what we've got here is the X1, which we put on, Y, and the Z1. Now on these connectors there are two different sizes, so you have to be careful of that. And as you can see here, they have a protrusion on one side, and they're clear on the other side. So when you're putting those in, that's got to line up with the groove or the cutaway that they're put into the board, and the same goes for the motor. It's got to go the right orientation, and then they just push in nice and easily. Now just keep in mind that when you're assembling this, because the actual manual, which I'll show you later, is completely different to what the board layout is. So that's your X, and then you have a Y, but you use the second Y, and then you have your Z axis, and this one here is going to the actual motor. The next part we're going to connect is the power supply, and as you can see here, it's an AC to DC adapter. It has a 24 volt with a 4 amp output, and can operate on 100 to 240 volts. Now with reference to the power supply, they also provide you with a lead, and as you can see here, for the Australian conditions we can't use that lead, so they do provide an adapter for it, and the adapter just basically plugs in, and now you've got your three pin socket for use in Australia. The other end of your lead goes into your power supply, which is basically a switch mode power supply. Push that in, and your power to your board goes in that side, and now your power supply is connected for the unit. Well, we finally got the machine right completed as far as the general assembly goes. There are a couple of add-ons which we'll show you a bit later on, but I just want to run through a few of the challenges we had with this assembly procedure. Well, one of the first parts we had is that like lining up right the actual base and the right gantry. Trying to get that square and even was a bit of a challenge, because each time you tightened up on the screws that that locked it all in, what we were finding is that it was actually moving these out of position, and well, like one end would rise or both ends would rise, so we kind of end up with a bit of a challenge there. We were able to sort that out and and make sure that everything was square and aligned in. Another part we ran into issues with were the supplied screws themselves. We didn't have enough of the right size, and and the 5mm screws, the 5 by 10mm screws, and there were kind of a wide head screw that we're using and a narrow head screw that they supplied. So it was the narrow head ones that we actually ran out of. The wide head ones were were fine. So we had to source a supply for those and and obtain a few of those so that we could finish off the project. Other than that, everything else was pretty much straightforward. We did run into a few issues with trying to get the guide rods in. These rods here on this end and that end as well, and they were a bit difficult to get through. You could get one end through, but it was very hard to get the other end through, and you had to be careful that you didn't throw all your alignment out again when you were doing that. So you've got to be careful there if you're assembling something like this. Now, another issue that we ran into is the printed circuit board. Now, we ended up getting a supplied copy, and we got a copy offline. Now, if I hold up this particular board here, right, is different to this board here, and as you can see, we've got the base ones across the top here, which are those ones there, and then we've got two small connectors here which are fitting into this area. We have two different connectors, one's a 2-pin, one's a 3-pin in this area down here. So that made it quite difficult as to what was really going on. So we went online and we thought, well, there must be a newer design, and there you go again, but everything's reversed. So we ran into an issue here. So the supplied photograph here looks like to be a mirror image of what's here, but even in saying that, again, the right connector layouts are different. So we ran into a problem there as well. So you've got to be careful what you're doing, and after chasing down on the board, we were able to work out that this particular one here, which is x-axis, this is a y, seems to be paralleled into this one, which is a y-axis as well, and then you had your z-axis, which was here. These two here, this one here is your 12 volt to 36 volt connector, but this one down here is also your 12 volt to 36 volt connector. This one here appears to be a laser connector, 2-pin, but if you go down here, they show the laser connector down here also, but now we've got a 2-pin and a 3-pin. Now the supplied cable that we got with the laser, which we've also got as part of, as the extra part of this kit, is a 3-pin connector. So we're assuming that this one here is for the laser. Another important aspect is that there's a jumper pin down here, and that jumper pin allows you to connect as a CNC, or if you swap it over the other way, it's for laser operation.